Hello, I am Prajakta Hanamga from TI AIDS. So today I am going to explain Introduction to Hierarchical Clustering. So we start with the introduction of clustering. Clustering is a method used to group similar data points together based on their features. It helps to organize data into meaningful groups without any prior knowledge of the group levels. This way, data is similar properties end up in the same group, make it easier to analyze and understand large data sets. Next, we understand what is the hierarchical clustering. Hierarchical clustering is a way to group data points into clusters step by step, creating a tree-like structure called a dendrogram. It starts by treating each data point as its own cluster. Then it is repeatedly merges the closest clusters until all points are grouped into one big cluster or until a desired number of clusters is reached. This method helps us see how clusters form at different levels of similarities. Next slide, we see that types of hierarchical clustering. There are two types of hierarchical clustering, agglomerative clustering and divisive clustering. We see one by one. First one is the agglomerative clustering. This is a bottom-up approach. It starts with each data point as its own cluster and then merges the closest cluster step by step until all points form one big cluster. Second is the divisive clustering. This is a top-down approach. It starts with all data points in one big cluster and then splits it into smaller clusters step by step until each data point becomes its own cluster or the desired number of clusters is reached. Next, we see the how hierarchical clustering works. Hierarchical clustering works by easier merging or splitting clusters step by step to build a hierarchy of clusters. In agglomerative clusters bottom-up approach, it starts with the each data point as its own cluster. Then it finds the two closest cluster and merge them. This process repeats merging clusters one by one until all points are grouped into one big clusters or until one decides to stop. In divisive clusters, it is a top-down approach. It begins with all data points in one big clusters and split the clusters into small ones step by step until each point is alone or you reach the desired number of clusters. The result is shown as a tree called a dendrogram, which helps visualize how clusters are formed at different levels. Next, we understand the linkage criteria for clustering. Linkage criteria are rules used to decide how to merge the distance between clusters when merging or splitting them in hierarchical clustering. They help determine which cluster should be joined next. There are three main types. There are four main types. We understand one by one. First is the single linkage. Measure the shortest distance between any 2 points in the cluster. It merges cluster based on their closest point. Second is the complete linkage. Measure the longest distance between 2 points in the clusters. It merges clusters based on their farthest points. Third is the average linkage. Uses the average distance between all points in the two clusters to decide which cluster is merged. Fourth is the Watts linkage, merges clusters that causes the smallest increase in total variance within clusters, aiming for compact similar groups. And each linkage method affects the shape and size of the clusters formed. Next, we understand the dendrogram. A dendrogram is a tree-like diagram that shows how clusters are formed in the hierarchical clustering. It starts with the individual data points at the bottom and joins them up step by step into bigger clusters as you move up. The height of the line connecting clusters shows how similar or different the clusters are. The longer the line, the more similar the clusters. By cutting the dendrogram at a certain height, you can decide how many clusters to keep. It helps us visualize the process and understand the relationship between the cluster at different levels. In next slide, we understand the pros and cons of hierarchical clustering. There are some pros and cons. We, we see one by one. First, we understand the pros. Easy to understand and interrupt because of dendrogram. Second is the does not require specifying the numbers of clusters in advance. Third is the works well for small to medium sized data sets. And fourth is the can fix clusters of different shapes and size. There are some cons. Computationally expensive and slow for very large data sets. Once a large or split is done, it cannot be undone. Sensitive to noise and outliers which can affect clusters quality. Choose of linkage and distance measure can greatly affect results. Here are some applications of hierarchical clustering. We see one by one. First one is the customer segmentation, grouping customers with similar behaviors for the targeted marketing. Second is the Gini expression analysis, organizing Gini with similar patterns to study biological functions. Third one is the document clustering, grouping similar documents or articles for the easier search and categorization. Fourth one is the image segmentation, dividing images into meaningful parts for the analysis. Fifth one is the social network analysis, identifying communities or groups within networks and peoples. Thank you.